Agent Under Fire is one of the rare first-person shooters with a good scoring system. Most games just keep track of the number of enemies you've killed, and they might have some other stats like secrets, and maybe they might even show your time. Agent Under Fire, however, goes in the opposite direction. It shows everything you would want to know about your gameplay, and it gives you a score to go along with it. In this video, I want to talk about what I think makes this game's scoring system so unique. First, let's talk about what the game keeps track of. There are bond moves, which are basically this game's versions of the secrets you could find in older games like Quake, except they tend to involve using Bond's weapons and gadgets in creative ways. Next, it shows things like the number of enemies you've killed, your weapon accuracy, damage taken, and your time. I feel like these are pretty self-explanatory, so I won't spend too much time talking about these, but I do need to explain ammo efficiency. Ammo efficiency is the number of enemies you've killed divided by the number of shots fired, and that includes things like grenades and rockets too. That means if there are 25 enemies and you've shot 50 bullets, your efficiency will be 50%. Ammo efficiency works this way because Agent Under Fire's developers didn't just want you to run through the game and play perfectly like you might expect a speedrunner to do. They wanted to design a scoring system that encourages you to play like a secret agent. A good secret agent doesn't go around spraying everybody with a submachine gun. They use silenced weapons and pick off enemies without anyone knowing. Basically, you want to fire as few bullets as possible to kill every enemy in the game. That means automatic weapons are going to destroy your ammo efficiency because you'll fire more shots than necessary to kill each enemy. Ideally, you'll want to use semi-automatic weapons and get headshots to reduce the number of bullets you use. Explosives are also really efficient because you can take out multiple enemies at once. However, the most efficient weapon is your fists, though that's rarely seen in high score runs because you'll take too much damage if you just run up to people and smack them. It's really only viable if you can sneak up behind a lone enemy and hit them in the back, which will immediately kill them. Just keep in mind that your ammo efficiency doesn't always have to be perfect. It just needs to be good enough to reach the target, which is different for each level. In stealth levels, the developers expected you to maintain 100% efficiency, but they're pretty lenient in the more action-packed levels with a lot of enemies running around. The only stat that I haven't mentioned yet is your 007 bonus, which you get for collecting all of the hidden 007 tokens scattered throughout the game. You'll also get a difficulty bonus that doubles your score if you're playing on 00 Agent. The thing that makes Agent Under Fire's scoring system so unique is that there's actually a maximum score, which is 300,000 points. All you have to do is reach the target for each stat. Now that sounds really simple, but actually doing that is an exercise in patience. The main reason for this depends on the type of level you're playing, because the on-foot levels and the driving levels actually handle things differently. For the on-foot levels, the biggest challenge is the damage taken. If you want to achieve a perfect score, you cannot take any damage for any reason whatsoever. That's not too hard to do in some of the stealth levels like Bad Diplomacy or Cold Reception, but it's nearly impossible to pull off in the action levels like Evil Summit or even Trouble in Paradise, the very first level. So let me give you some specific examples of what a perfect score run looks like. Mediterranean Crisis has the reputation of being the hardest level for both speedruns and score runs. This is because there are enemies all over the place, and it's hard to deal with one without alerting all the others. See, most levels will have just one or two parts that are really hard for a perfect score, but this one has one for every other room. This part about halfway through the level is notoriously random. As soon as you get up here, the game starts a scripted sequence where two enemies run into the room and hide behind the table in front of you. Two more enemies will show up right after that. You could try to headshot all these guys, but that's probably not going to happen. Instead, this is the perfect time to use grenades. People deal with this part by throwing one grenade to the left and one grenade to the right. That usually takes everybody out, but sometimes this second enemy on the right will survive and run into the room anyway. He's not much of a problem if he's by himself though. This part feels somewhat random because the grenades don't always work like you'd expect them to. Sometimes enemies can survive if there's something between them and the grenade, so all these random objects in this room can sometimes block the explosions. That's why the guy on the right can survive sometimes. He's behind this corner and the explosion from the grenades won't always hit him. However, during the making of this video, I found a faster way through this part of the map, and it works every time. First, make sure you have your grenades equipped before grappling up here. Then, throw a grenade just toward the green locker on the left side of the room. It's not very precise, just anywhere in this general area will be fine. Then go through the door on the right as soon as the enemy runs through it. Normally, enemies shoot you on sight, but these ones are scripted to run to the table and hide behind it. That gives you time to run through the hallway, turn around, and throw a grenade behind you. There's an enemy standing in here, But he's not doing anything because he's waiting to run into the room behind that other guy. He's part of that scripted sequence I mentioned earlier. Anyway, the grenade will explode and kill the guy in the hallway along with anyone else that's chasing you. The first grenade will kill the two enemies on the left, and usually the one on the right too, but if the enemy on the right chases you back into the hallway, the second grenade will get him. Not only is this much easier to do in a run, it's also faster, which these days is what it takes to get a world record in a perfect score run. The Agent Under Fire community has a leaderboard for perfect score speedruns, and your time is essentially a tiebreaker. Mediterranean Crisis started out as one of the hardest levels to complete a perfect score on, but it's strategies like this that make it a lot easier. Now, everything I've been telling you about Mediterranean Crisis so far adds up to about 5 seconds of gameplay, and this isn't even the hardest part. Immediately after this, there's a part where you have to climb 4 flights of stairs while enemies are shooting at you and throwing grenades from above. For a while, this room and the next one were thought to make perfect scores here impossible, but as always, players will persevere and find ways to solve problems like this. People deal with this part by using a specific grenade setup as if they were playing Counter-Strike. If you stand in a specific spot and aim at a specific place, you can throw grenades in the same way every single time. So if there's a part like this that seems impossible, people will spend time figuring out exactly where you can throw a grenade to take out the problem enemies every single time. This is the kind of stuff you have to do to get a perfect score in a game where perfect scores really weren't meant to be possible. Perfect scores aren't all about creative grenade setups though. There's a part just after this where you have to climb up a ladder and rescue a hostage in the next room. The problem is that there are 2 enemies in this room, and you can't shoot both of them at the same time. In the past, people would climb up to the top of the ladder, shoot the first enemy, finish climbing the ladder, and then turn as quickly as possible to shoot the other guy on the right before he starts shooting you. Unfortunately, the enemies can be kind of random, so sometimes you could kill him without any problems, and other times he would shoot you before you could even do anything. To get around this, you could kill that guy before climbing the ladder by jumping over here and shooting him from below. You could just barely see his head at the peak of your jump. Now that he's out of the picture, you can climb up the ladder and kill the first guy without any trouble. See, this part wasn't even that hard. It was totally possible to get through here without taking damage, but that one enemy was random enough to frustrate players into finding a better way to deal with him. Now let's talk about the driving levels, because they actually keep score in a slightly different way. Most of it is the same, but here, a perfect score requires perfect accuracy, and that's a lot harder than it sounds. You have to hit all these small moving targets while you're also moving around. It's almost impossible, but the one saving grace here is that your stats in the driving levels actually round to the nearest whole number. So you technically only need 99.5% accuracy for it to round up to 100, but that doesn't give you much room for error. The other challenge is minimizing the damage you take. Thankfully, this one's a little easier, but that's not saying much. Taking 0 damage in driving levels sounds like it would be impossible because some damage is unavoidable, but the stats here work a little differently than you might expect. See, on the results screen it says damage taken 0%, but for the driving levels this is a bit misleading. What it's really saying is you've taken 0% more damage than you're allowed to take in this level. Here's an example of what I mean. In the mission Dangerous Pursuit, you can see that I've clearly taken damage here, but the results screen still says 0%. This is because the driving levels don't start counting against you until you've hit a certain amount of damage. It's a bit confusing because it doesn't show the amount of damage that you've actually taken, just how much you've gone over your budget, basically. If they ever decide to remaster this game, I'd suggest reworking the results screen to include a column for your target, while also showing the amount of damage you've taken, kinda like how Nightfire does it. That's the one major flaw with this game's scoring system, that it's not totally obvious what's going on under the hood. Speaking of flaws in the scoring system, let's talk about Forbidden Depths. This is the final on-rails mission in the game, and it's also the hardest one to get a perfect score in, by far. The challenge here is that it's impossible to maintain perfect accuracy, and I mean that it's actually impossible. The reason is because there's a part where Block, the game's antagonist, is dropping mines on the track in front of you, and you have to shoot them all to get one of the 007 tokens. Unfortunately, these mines don't count as enemies, so shooting one of them is basically the same as shooting the ground. There's another part later in the mission where you have to shoot these switches and fan blades, and that also counts against you. In the best case scenario, you'll end up with 99% accuracy. But I'm sure you know that somebody got a perfect score anyway, so how did they do it? Well, remember that you technically only need 99.5% accuracy in the driving levels. That means you can miss a few shots and still get a perfect score, but this level forces you to miss too many shots for that to help here. That is, unless you use the rocket launcher. If you shoot the 3 monitors with the blue screens on them at the first stop, a rocket launcher will spawn on the track in front of you. This is great by itself, but there's an added bonus here. It turns out that the enemies and the vehicles they drive are considered 2 separate enemies, and a single explosion will hit both of them. That means if you were only fighting these enemies and you just used the rocket launcher, you could technically get 200% accuracy. In Cosmic X's video of his perfect score, you can see that he shoots rockets toward this enemy, but not directly at him. The rockets are close enough that the explosion counts as a hit on both the enemy and the car, but far enough away that it's basically doing no damage. Since the game doesn't progress until you kill this enemy, Cosmic X can just keep shooting him to increase his accuracy. You can also do this with Block later on since he can't be killed. With all that in mind, it's just barely possible to get a perfect score on Forbidden Depths. The rocket strategy makes it possible, but it's still insane because you also have to finish within the target time. You can't just sit here forever and make perfect accuracy easy. You really only have enough time to make up for the shots that you're forced to miss. But still, if it's possible, someone's gonna go for it. And Cosmic X is the only person right now to have video proof of a perfect score on Forbidden Depths. With that, he also became the first and only person to achieve a perfect score on every level in Agent Under Fire. Other people have come close, but Forbidden Depths is like the final barrier that you have to dedicate a lot of time to get through. I think Agent Under Fire is proof that if you design a game with a fun and interesting scoring system, it'll give people another reason to keep playing the game. Speedrunners are known for being the type of people to dedicate more time to a game than anyone else, but high scores give players a chance to compete with each other in a different way. The fact that there's a maximum score means that everyone who plays this game has a common goal to work toward, which isn't something you see often in speedrunning. Agent Under Fire has one of my favorite high score systems in a game, but I haven't played every game out there. Do you know of any that have a scoring system like this? If so, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you like this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing, since I plan to make many more videos like this one in the future. Thanks for watching.